All right, welcome everybody. Good evening. I see we got a strong group coming in here. I'll kind of take my time here at the beginning to allow those who are just joining us to kind of get settled in, get all their audio settings right, sit down, relax, grab any materials that they need if they want to take notes. I'm just kidding, you don't have to take notes for this. But as those are coming in, because I'm seeing the number grow quite high, which is great. I'm glad we're getting a lot of parents here tonight. Let me just kind of go over a few things and then we'll kind of get started. First off, if you've never been to one of our webinars before, at the very bottom of the screen in a Zoom webinar, we have the chat disabled, but we do have the Q&A available. And so that Q&A is a feature that allows you to ask questions as we go along. We will be monitoring that, but keep in mind, there's only a few of us that are either hosting or as panelists for this particular session. So we may not get to all those questions, but we'll try to answer as many as we possibly can. In a moment, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I also want to make sure you're in the right place. So a couple of things about tonight's session. This is, in a way, you could think of this as part 2 of our ParentVUE series. So we just wrapped up at 6 o'clock. We had a session introducing what ParentVUE is. So this particular session is kind of part 2 to that. Assuming you already understand that ParentVUE is our new parent portal, tonight's session on online registration is kind of the next step, because one of the features of ParentVUE, besides being able to find all that information about grades and teacher emails and school information and all that good stuff, ParentVUE also has the ability to use what's called online registration, which allows you to do things like emergency card, or what we are referring to now as the annual verification of student information. So if you remember way back at the beginning of last year, it seems like crazy to think that long ago, before all of our current situation existed, you probably received those yellow emergency cards, and some of you may have done your registration through our previous parent portal. Synergy has its own version of that in ParentVUE. So our focus tonight is really on how does that work? How can you go in and update all of your students' information as well as your own information, so that at the beginning of the year, schools have the most up-to-date info on their records. That's our focus tonight. So if you did not participate in our sort of part 1, if you want to call it that, that's okay. You can still listen in. I'm going to do a quick review of what ParentVUE is and how to activate that account once you get those activation letters. But know that we're really focused on one of the unique elements of ParentVUE called online registration. All right. So I see our numbers are starting to slow down. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me introduce myself. I'm Jason Sherwood. I'm one of the technology implementation specialists for Montgomery County. And with me tonight, helping to sort of man the questions, if you will, we have Kara Trenkamp and Ryan McNavage. They're going to be taking a look at your questions and hopefully keeping up with those as we continue on. My role, as well as Ryan, is primarily as teacher trainers. We are training staff, not just teachers, but all staff in MCPS on how to use various technology, but that also includes parents as well, like you. So we're here with this series of sessions to hopefully get you up to speed in terms of what is new, such as Synergy and ParentVUE, as well as some of the tools that teachers will be using this fall to help support remote learning. We have some sessions specifically for that, things like how to use Zoom and how to use My MCPS Classroom. So those are other sessions. One of the things I'm going to ask that I mentioned to those that joined us a few minutes ago is that in our webinars, we have that Q&A feature for you to ask questions. Since there's only so few of us, and we definitely probably won't get to all of your questions, if you could help us by focusing your questions just to tonight's topic. So I know you might be having questions maybe about My MCPS Classroom, or what remote learning is going to look like in a couple weeks, or who your child's teacher might be. First of all, we're not even able to answer that question right now, but let's try to focus our questions just on this particular application called ParentVUE Online Registration. That way we can get to as many of those questions as we possibly can. Now, if we don't get to your questions, no worries. we still think your questions are valuable. And what we will be using those questions for as we go forward is we will be sort of collecting those even after this webinar is over. We'll be reviewing them, and we're going to try and build sort of an FAQ of some of the frequently asked questions in our sessions, and then we'll make that sort of a document available for parents to look at on our website. So it is still important that we sort of capture those questions. So even if we don't get to it, I still encourage you to go ahead and ask it. But please don't take offense if we don't get to your particular question, because as I said, we have a lot of people in attendance tonight and there's only so many of us. So please be patient with us. Now, we will be recording this session. So at a later point, you will be able to come back and view this session. Now, it may not actually be this session. It could be one of our previous sessions. We're trying to take the session that we thought was the best, most clear, and probably address the most questions that parents have. And then what we will do is we'll download that particular recording from Zoom, we'll edit it, we'll upload it, we'll make that available either through our YouTube channel or onto the MCPS webpage. But we'll make that available at some point. Just give us some time for that. And so you can encourage others that maybe weren't able to attend tonight, let them know that recordings will be available at some point where they'll be able to watch and view this in their own time. They don't necessarily have to join us live for this, okay? Now, let's go ahead and get started because we have a lot to cover tonight. So I'm gonna go ahead and show our agenda. As I mentioned, our goal tonight is really to talk a little bit about part one of our session, which is understanding what ParentVUE is and understanding how to activate that account, because that's a key component. You have to do that first in order to use online registration. So I'll quickly recap what that was and what I covered in my earlier session today. I also want to spend the bulk of our time kind of walking through what is online registration, what's going to be available to parents throughout the year in terms of online registration. And then I'm going to spend the majority of time focused on the one online registration that is already live and available. So as soon as you activate your ParentVUE account, you'll have access to that, and that's called annual verification of information. And I'm going to walk you through what is all covered there, at least give you a general overview of the types of things you'll be asked and you'll be expected to enter in terms of information, things that you can update and change, and how that process works. At the end, I'll wrap it all up. I'll talk about some resources that are available to you. And throughout the time, I'll probably ask at certain moments if there are any common questions that need to be addressed. I'll try and pause at times to answer those as we go through. All right, so let's get started with the first thing that you need to know, and that is sort of a recap from my previous session on how do you activate a ParentVUE account. Well, if you didn't join us for the other session, I want you to understand that probably starting Friday evening or into the weekend, and actually this is a multi-day process. We have a huge population of parents and students in Montgomery County. So this isn't something we can do in just like one moment and it just goes poof, goes to everyone. So it's gonna be a sort of a rolling process, but probably starting Friday evening or early Saturday, we're gonna start generating these letters and email notifications. What these are activation letters that every parent will receive, and they will receive their own version of it. So even if there are multiple parents living in the same household, each parent will get their own activation letter. Now, if they are parents that share the same child, share custody of a child, but they live in separate addresses, maybe it's a divorce situation where they're living in different homes, they will still each get their own ParentVUE activation letter. All right. But in order to get a parent activation letter, there are some requirements. Number one, we have to know either A, what your email address is, so we can send you the email version. That's our primary way of sending this to you. Or B, we need to have your home address so that we can send that to your home mailing address, so you'll receive actual physical letter in the mail. And not only do we need to know one of those two, preferably the email, but the home address as well, you have to be a parent associated with the student, and you have to be a parent that has custody, has contact allowed with that student, and has education rights. All right. If you meet that criteria and we have your home address or preferably your email address on file, you will receive one of these two forms of this letter. Now, once you receive that, I'm not going to walk you through the steps because I addressed it in another webinar, but it's pretty simple. You'll activate your ParentVUE account. It replaces your previous parent portal account. So if you are one of our parents who use the MyMCPS parent portal, it is now being completely replaced with the new ParentVUE parent portal. So old logins, passwords no longer work. You will kind of start from scratch in a sense. You will activate that account. You'll create a new username, a new password, and then you'll be able to log in. That piece is important because in order to complete online registration, you must have an activated ParentVUE account. All right. So again, if you want to know more about the ParentVUE activation process or just ParentVUE in general, we have additional webinar sessions that we'll be providing, or soon you'll have a recording that you can view of that particular session. And I'll talk about a resource at the end where you can go and either register for those or hopefully be able to view them. But we're going to progress here as if you already have viewed that and you have already successfully activated an account. What can you look forward to after activating that ParentVUE account? And so that takes us into ParentVUE itself. So here's a kind of a generic screenshot of what ParentVUE looks like. In ParentVUE, you'll have images of your students, of your children. If you have more than one, there's actually a drop-down menu here so you can toggle between them, similar to the previous version where you had different tabs for each children. Here it's the same idea. It's just a drop down where you can choose which student you want to focus to. And then you have a variety of menu options here, similar to our previous system where you can get information. Now there's an addition of Synergy Mail, which a lot of people think is exciting. But we talk about that in our other session. But the one I'm going to focus on, which we don't talk about in our other session, we talk about this side, but we don't talk about what's up here. So online registration is what I want to focus on now. And so when we talk about online registration, we're talking about how you update student and parent information. So how do you do that? Well, when you actually complete your activation of your ParentVUE account, you can click on this online registration and it will take you to, at some point, as many as 3 different options. And maybe that could even grow as we go further, and because our plan is to keep this for quite some time. So this is going to be our new parent portal moving forward for the long term, not just for remote learning. But right now, the only online registration that is available is the annual verification. But rolling out soon will be things like athletic registration, will be things like new student enrollment. So if you have a student that's new to MCPS and you're already a parent who has an active ParentVUE account, you can actually enroll your student through this online registration, which is kind of a neat feature. So we're thinking of, you know, long-term, if we're not able to be in school buildings, how do we get parents access to this? Now, currently student enrollment is still done with like the Google form for those who have done that recently, but eventually we will move to these additional forms of online registration. Our focus right now though is just going to be on annual verification. But one thing I want to point out, whether it's annual verification or any of the other two, we're really only going to focus on using online registration through the web version. I know that we are trying to get it configured to work with the mobile app. And for those of you that learned about the mobile app in our last session, there is an option to use online registration there, but if you were to go there today, it would give you an error that it's not working. So we're going to focus just on online registration from the web-based version, which is fine because if you are using even a mobile device, you can still log into your ParentVUE account through the web browser on your mobile device, and you can access the ParentVUE online registration from there. All right, so you can still do that from a mobile device. You would just do it from the browser on your mobile device as opposed to the app. All right, hopefully more information to come on that compatibility with the app. But for now, we're going to focus on the web-based version. So when you first join in and activate your account, and you want to do the online registration, one of the things that you may notice is that when you first go in, you're going to have to complete this annual verification the moment you log in, or possibly after you've logged in several times. And what I mean by that is, after a few times of exploring ParentVUE, you may get this little pop-up that you see here that says, all right, if you want to continue looking at ParentVUE, you need to take care of something. You need to take care of your online registration. So you may see this, which you could begin the registration at that point by clicking the blue button. For most of you though, I'm willing to bet that once you activate your ParentVUE account, this will probably be one of the top 3 things you're going to want to take care of. You know, besides maybe seeing student schedules on the 26th, you'll probably want to go ahead and update student information. So for many of you, you might just click on that online registration tab. And as I said, right now, when you go to start online registration, the only option is annual verification. So as you're seeing in this image down below, you won't get a drop down. It'll just say you're entering annual verification, and then you'll get the blue button to begin. So once you begin online registration, in this case for annual verification, you're going to be greeted with a welcome screen. And so one of the things you'll notice here, it's actually very similar to the way ParentVUE is set up, where you have these sort of tabs, these navigation tabs on the left, and then you have a body of information here to the right. So the same idea, if I needed to leave ParentVUE, I can just click on ParentVUE. And the nice thing is as I go through this process, at any point, if I need to stop, I need to leave this, go back to ParentVUE, or maybe even log out completely because I need to have another errand to run, or I have other things that I need to take care of. You can leave this and come back and it will resume where you left off. All right, so until you get to the final step of submitting, you can actually continue at any point. But these are broken down into these sort of categories of steps. The first step, which is introduction, really is just sort of an overview of what this process is. There's directions there that explain it. And probably the most important part in this introduction is when you get to the second screen, which is the student summary. And on the student summary, you will see a list of all the students that you have access to edit information for. So for this particular example, this would be a parent who only has 1 child. If you have multiple children, you will see them all listed here. And it's a good time to just confirm that those are, in fact, students that are your children, that you are the parent or guardian for. You can also look at that to make sure that there's no errors or anything. If you notice there's a name there that should not be, or a student that should not be associated to your account, obviously you would want to immediately contact our school. But we work pretty hard on cleaning up all that data, so I don't think you'll run into that problem. But this is a good point just to review and make sure you have everything covered. All right? Definitely reach out to your school if it's not accurate. But if there's something simple like just like the name change, you can still go through this process and then contact the school later, and then they can make those changes. I notice in some cases, maybe they put an L instead of an I. You know, little things like that. They're more like clerical errors. You can contact the school after submitting this, and they can take care of it then. But once you move past that and you're confirmed that, okay, those are the students that you need to update information for, it's going to move you to the next step. And in this case, it's going to move you to the Family tab. And in the Family tab, there's a couple of screens you'll go through. They are primarily all based on address. So definitely want to check to make sure that your home address is accurate. If for any reason your home address has changed, you actually can change it here. You can check this box. You can make changes to your address. You can update it. In some cases, maybe a home address was never entered for the parent record. There's a home address for the student, but for some reason it never got entered as the parent. So you may see that there's nothing there, or it might say no address given. You'll definitely want to click that box, check it so that you can enter in the new address, and then you can save and continue. If you make any changes to an address, that is one of those changes that require a review, as well as, and that, when I say review, a review by school staff, as well as an upload of some form of documentation that verify your new address is accurate. So that could be something like a utility bill, but at the very end, I'll show you those you can actually upload as a document to this, or you can send it to the school, either a hard copy, either deliver it to them or mail it to them, or even email them in a separate email outside of this particular application. But that's one of those changes. And the same is true for mailing address. One thing I'll point out about mailing address is that we've noticed sometimes a parent record will have a home address, but there was no mailing address listed for it. By default, it should have checked this box that your mail address is the same as your home address. So if that's not checked and you do in fact have the same home address as your mailing address, make sure that that is checked. If not, you can actually either uncheck that or enter the correct mailing address if it is in fact different from your home address. So you'll do that step and you'll continue. Again, it's all about save and continue. As long as you hit save and continue, if you were to log out and come back in, it'll bring you back to wherever you last clicked that save and continue button. All right. The next phase is when you get to the parent guardian tab. Now the parent guardian tab is where you're going to indicate things related to your own demographics. And that's primarily your name. So if there's a misspelling in your name, you'll have an opportunity to change that. I think I got that question in my last session. What if my name's misspelled? Can I fix it? Yes, you can come to this demographics page and you can make that change to the spelling of your name and make that correction available there. There's an employment information, and that's primarily just to identify if you're an MCPS employee. I think it also asks if you have, if you're an active military, but that's it. You're not entering in your actual employment address or anything like that. It'll also walk you through entering contact information. So we have the most up-to-date phone number, the most up-to-date email. Phone number is required. Email is strongly recommended. However, if you do not have an email address, there is a box you can check that says you do not have an email address, even though I would strongly recommend it since the majority of communication tends to be through email. So there are numerous ways to get a free email account. So I encourage you to do that if you haven't done that already. But that's in the contact information. Even if you didn't check that under employment that you are in the military, you may still see the military status page. If you're not military, you can just kind of skip that, hit save and continue. Don't worry about filling out. It's not a required field. But if you want to enter in information about your military status, you can enter that here. The last thing is it will bring you back and give you an indication that you have completed entering information for you. And then there may be other parent or guardians listed that you have access to edit. As long as the other parent or guardian that's listed here shares the same home address, you can edit their information. So technically one person in the household could go through and complete the annual verification process as long as they live in the same household and they also share that same education rights, custody, and contact allowed. You will be able to edit their information as well. You also have the ability to add new parent guardian information. So if there's somebody missing, let's say maybe you got married since the last time this happened, or maybe there's a guardian that needs to be added since the previous year, you can add them to this. Just note that any change to parent guardian generally triggers a review, so it won't be automatically accepted, and a school staff will have to review it to confirm that everything is done correctly. But once you get through the parent guardian piece, that takes you into the emergency contact part. And so one thing I need everyone to understand is that emergency contacts are separate, but they are in some cases connected to parent guardian. And the only reason I say they're connected because at the final step, when you choose the order of who gets contacted, you'll see a list of both emergency and parent guardians. But you should not be listing emergency contacts for parent and guardian. They're completely separate. So if you have a neighbor who you want as an emergency contact, or you have a grandmother who wants to be the emergency contact, you're going to be adding them in this next phase, not under parent guardian. And so everyone is required to have at least one emergency contact, and that emergency contact has to have a first and last name and has to have a way to contact them. So a phone number must be included for that contact. You can have more than one, but you have to have at least one. It did not bring over, as far as I understand, the previous emergency contacts because they're not the emergency contacts that were entered in our previous system aren't always accurate, or a lot of times people entered it in the wrong section. So we're starting fresh. Find your emergency contact information that you want to include here, add them as new emergency contacts, enter in their name and however you want to have them contacted, and then you can continue to add as many as you like. As long as you have that green complete check, you'll be able to continue on past this step, and then that takes you to the student phase. So in the student phase is probably where you're going to spend the bulk of your time because there's a lot of screens for student information. All right, you'll first see a list of students that you have ability to edit. You'll start with whoever is listed first, or you can go in a variety of order. There's a little edit button next to that row that has the student name. If for some reason you wanted to exclude a student, you didn't want to include them in this annual verification, or maybe they no longer attend an MCPS school, you do have the ability to exclude them. But for most of them, you'll click edit. It'll take you to the next screen, which asks you to associate a home address to them or to confirm who do they live primarily with. And that's especially for situations where a student may have parents that are divorced that live at different addresses. So you'll want to choose what is the address that they primarily live, and that'll be associated as the home address for that student. You'll also include contact information, but this contact information is not the contact information of the student. In other words, don't enter your high schooler's cell phone here. This is the contact information that if something were to happen at school and they needed to communicate information to whoever is responsible for that student, what is the number or what is the contact information that you want them to reach out to? That's what that contact information is. By default, it brings over the home phone number that was associated with the parent that they are primarily living with, but you can change that. So if you want the school to always contact your cell phone for any information, you can change that here. You also have the ability to choose what the relationships are for your parent and guardian. So you can change, if a parent no longer has ed rights, you can change that. If a parent maybe at one time didn't have mailings allowed, you could now check that to allow them to get mailings about the student. You have full control over that as long as the parent shares the same address as you. If it is a parent that does not have the same address, you do not get control over whether or not they have ed rights, contact allowed, or et cetera. They would have to set that when they log in and go through this process, okay? Once that's set though, if you make any changes, that's another one of those areas that'll kind of send up a review flag, sort of, if you will. And so that the school staff, they won't have this auto accepted. They'll have to go in and review it to confirm everything is correct. The last thing, which I think is pretty cool, is the emergency contact order. And you'll see a list of not only the parent and guardians that are associated with the student, but also any additional emergency contacts. And then you'll be able to simply drag and drop the order that you want the school to contact in the event that there is an emergency. All right. So for example, if the father might not be able to be the first emergency contact, you could switch the mother ahead of him, or you could switch the grandmother ahead of both of those if that's the person who needs to be contacted in an emergency. All right, you have control over that. Student information continues though, because you also have to include student information related to health information, their health history, such as are they allergic to bee stings? Can they carry an inhaler? A lot of those things, if you answer yes, you'll want to enter in some additional information. And for certain cases like inhalers, there are forms that you have to fill out, and then you're going to upload or submit at a later time that allow students to carry those when they return to school. So if you're thinking maybe in the spring when students return, a student needs to have maybe an EpiPen or an inhaler with them, you'll definitely want to actually include that information now, sort of thinking of the future, even though technically they won't be in the school buildings for the fall. You'll also have a directory withholding page where you can choose what information about your student is not included in the directory, such as if you don't want your address in the directory, you don't want their photo in the directory, or maybe you want certain information to be withheld, such as their images and video and recordings, you can have that withheld. You'll be given that annual notification of your rights under FERPA. So that's just basically a text of reading, and you'll check that, and then you'll get to bus routes. Now, bus routes may not apply to your child, and those might just be blank, and that's fine. Maybe they're a walker, or maybe you provide the transportation and you can just save and continue. But if your child does use a bus, even if it's occasionally, you'll want to check to see if that bus route is correct. Once you complete that information for students, that actually brings you to the second to last step, which is the documents tab. And that's if there was anything that you changed, or if there's anything you indicated on there that requires additional documentation. That next little tab there will give you an option to either upload, like as you see, there's a blue little button that says upload. So you could upload a digital copy of that document, or you can check the box, and that indicates that you're going to deliver a hard copy. Now keep in mind, that doesn't mean you actually have to deliver it physically to the school. You could mail it to the school, or maybe you could send it in an email. Maybe you don't have access to it, but keep in mind, you can always stop at this point. Remember, as long as you've been clicking save and continue, it's going to remember where you left off. So I could leave here. I could go get those forms. I could go fill those out. I could, get a digital version of it. And then I could come back to this at a later point, and now I'm ready to upload it. And then I could continue the process at that point. All right. But that's the next step. And once you are there, you're almost to the end. The only thing left to do at this point is really to review. And so on that last piece, you are required to review before you can submit. And what the review looks like is basically a summary of everything that is entered from all of these tabs, And the things that are highlighted in yellow, as long as you have this show changes turned to on, those will indicate the things that you have changed. You can even hover over it and it'll tell you what it was previously so you can identify what was changed. You'll scroll through this page. You'll look at all those changes to make sure they're accurate. If for any reason you made a mistake, or maybe there's an area that you needed to change, but you didn't, see the little edit button here? I don't know if you guys can see this on your screens, but there's a little edit icon next to each of these headers. If you click that edit button, it'll take you back to that tab where that information is entered, and you can change it there and then return to the review submit afterwards. All right. But if you go through that entire list, you scroll all the way down to the bottom, all the way to the end. Transportation, remember, was the last thing you entered. You will have to check a box that says, I'm checking this box to verify that I have reviewed everything. I'm good with it. Everything is correct. I've made all the changes I need. That box is checked. Then you'll get the ability to submit. Now, when you do click the submit button, a confirmation little window will pop up that'll just say, hey, if you press OK at this point, you are officially submitting this. It's going to go to the school, and you will no longer be able to make changes to it at that point. So make sure you've completed everything. Make sure you have uploaded documents if you want to attach them before you hit submit, because you won't be able to do it after. All right, if you got everything ready, you're ready to confirm it. And at that point, you're pretty much done. The only exception is what happens next. And this part is kind of out of your hands at this point. If there were nothing really major that you changed, let's say you just kind of changed a phone number, maybe you just added an additional phone number or an emergency contact. For the most part, those will all be auto-accepted. And as soon as you hit submit, Synergy thinks about it, realizes, okay, no major changes here, or no flags that are going to be added. It's going to auto-accept. And at that point, all that new information now becomes a part of your record and your student's record. So there's nothing more you need to do. In fact, if you were to, go back to ParentVUE and, log out or log back in, or, you might have to do that or refresh the page, you'd probably see those updates pretty quickly once that happens. But there are certain cases, like I mentioned, that require a staff member to review it. When a staff member reviews it, they have the ability to either accept it, deny it, or they could reactivate. Now, in most cases, they're not going to deny it. Those are very rare situations where they would deny it. And at least for annual verification, I can't really think of a time where they would need to do that. They're either going to accept it, or if there are certain questions about certain things, the school has the ability to go in and edit it. Or they can do what's called Reactivate. And then Reactivate basically just takes it off of their role and then sends it back to you. And then it becomes an active link in ParentVUE again for you, and you can make further changes. So for example, let's say you are entering in contact information or emergency contact information, and one of the area code was completely way off. And the school reviewed that, and maybe they're saying, oh wait, this doesn't look right. And they send it back to you, they reactivate it for you to fix, and then you resubmit it. And then maybe at that point, then they accept it. So simple things like that. Or it could even be, you didn't upload your document, so they're waiting to receive those documents before they'll accept it. Or if you never send them those documents, or you realize, hey, I could upload this, they can reactivate it, and then you can upload it and resubmit. So you do have that ability there. All right. But you'll be able to view that status at that point. So that was a lot. It's actually a pretty smooth process. We have resources that walk you through that, but let me pause here before I get into the resources to see if there are any questions. So Ryan, did we have any common questions? Wow, you guys did an awesome job of staying on top of those questions. That's the first time I've ever looked down there and seen it blank.
Oh, so there's two of us.
Okay, yes, that helps.
There were lots of questions about kind of like joint custody, but there's also questions about uploading any kind of health form like immunization sheets and so on.
Right. So what was the question? I mean, to address it, like in custody issues, if, based on, depends on the situation, but in certain situations, if a parent does not have custody of a child, first of all, they wouldn't even be able to get their ParentVUE account. But if they do have custody, but maybe they can't see information for the other spouse, all that information would be blocked. They would only be able to see what they have access to. In terms of uploads, when you go to that upload, I probably should have taken a screenshot of this, but when you click upload, you'll navigate to where you can then search your computer for a file to attach it. And then it asks you to identify what's the type of document that it is. And so I believe there'll be a drop down where you just say, okay, like for example, the one we get most often is when there's a change of address. There has to be some sort of validation to it. So you might upload a document, it might be a utility bill, and then from the drop down, you just scroll through there and find utility bill and identify it as that, and then click submit. But in terms of specifically like immunization chart, again, like I said, you can just click that box that says, I'm going to deliver a hard copy, or maybe there's really no changes to it, and maybe that's something that doesn't apply. Then you would just check that box, move forward to it. And then again, if the school had any questions, once they're reviewing it, they would be responsible either reaching out to you and saying, oh no, we do need that form. We need you to bring it in, but that won't necessarily hold up your submission to the school. It just might hold up their acceptance of it. Any other questions, Ryan?
I think you've covered them all.
Okay. All right, so let's kind of continue through the end of this session so that we can wrap this up. It's getting late, but we have some resources for you. First off, I want you to take a look in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. There is a bit.ly that is written out there. It's bit.ly/synergyolr. You can write that down, take a screenshot of it, take a picture of it, whatever. But that, if you were to type that into the address bar or the URL address bar of your browser, exactly as it appears, all lowercase, bit.ly/synergyolr, that will actually take you to this presentation. All right, so you have access to this presentation to review if you would like it by using that bit.ly. And then on the very last slide of our presentation is where this resources is. And you'll see in the first 3 bullet points that are listed there, that's where you have the login to ParentVUE. So if you've already activated your account, you can click on that and go straight into ParentVUE, enter your username, password, and log in. Again, that will happen after you activate it. If you need that guide for the activation, because you're probably going to get those mailers or the email for it probably over the weekend or early next week at some point, you can click on these links and review, okay, how do I activate this? That'll walk you through those steps. Those are sort of like a one-sheeter guide for how to do that. But the third bullet point is this whole support guide. And in that support guide, not only does it cover how to log in, how to activate your account, but it also includes how do you complete online the online registration for annual verification. So it has all those steps that I showed you in this with a little broken down a little bit more screen by screen. We do have a support website, which is where you're going to find those first 3 links. So you can go to our public facing website to see that. And if you want to know more about maybe ParentVUE because you missed that session, or you want to know about some of our other sessions, that last bullet point there, which is our webinar schedule, you can click on that. That'll take you to sort of our schedule of events for the next week or 2, in which we have multiple sessions about a variety of topics. You can register for them. But know that we will be recording these webinars. We'll pick one that we thought we did really well in, and then we'll take that recording. We will download it from Zoom, edit it, upload it, wait for all that good stuff to process, and then we'll post it probably to our YouTube channel as well as the MCPS website, and we'll send that so that you guys have access to that as well. The last thing I'll point out is in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you have a question that we did not get to today, and maybe it's a really important question and you might not be able to wait until we compile our FAQs, if you send a email to MyMCPS support, it's the same email address that we used in our previous parent portal. We're not changing the email address and it still goes to the same Dropbox, but MyMCPS support at mcpsmd.org. Almost said it's something .org. There we go. Almost said .net, but MyMCPS support at mcpsmd.org. That's our Dropbox where we have many people that sort of monitor that and sort of take shifts on responding to emails that come in there. So if you have questions that you really want us to address, please feel free to send those there. I would not recommend sending them directly to me, even though I know my email address was on the registration for this particular webinar. My inbox is so full, I don't know that I will get to it within the next few days. So definitely want to send your questions there so we can answer that. Review all of our resources. Hopefully come back and visit one of our future webinars and probably watch some of our recordings. Before we finally sign off for the evening, are there any final thoughts or questions, Ryan, that you think we need to address?
One quick thing, I accidentally typed the 6 p.m. session. I put the presentation link for the 6 p.m. session in the chat, but I typed it in incorrectly. I'm going to post it again with the correct email address.
Perfect. All right, and I'll say once again, I apologize. We had a large audience here tonight. So if we did not get to your questions, we still answered. Well, I shouldn't say we, because it wasn't me. Thank you, Ryan and Kara, for doing that. Looks like we answered nearly 100 questions that were posted tonight. That's pretty impressive to be able to do while we're in the middle of these sessions. So if we didn't get to it, apologies. There's just so many people here. We hope that you'll get your answers as soon as we can. But I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We appreciate you guys partnering with us and sticking in this and learning about all the things that we have to offer. And we hope this was informational, and we hope to see you again soon. But for Ryan, Kara, and myself, we appreciate it. We hope you guys have a great evening tonight, and we'll see you guys soon. Good night, everyone.